Good evening, everyone. Happy Saturday. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and spending your evening with us, full of lovely music ahead. My name is Lora Painter. I'm the evening anchor at ABC 10 and a proud board member of your Sacramento Philharmonic and Opera. And I believe we have a lovely milestone tonight that we have reached. This is a full house. A sold-out show. That deserves a round of applause. That's a huge accomplishment, and thank you all for letting us out your support. Joining me on stage is our maestro, our principal conductor and artistic director, Ari Pelto. So, Ari, we have a wonderful lineup tonight. We have two Russian composers. Sibelius, he is from Finland. Let's first start off talking about the RACHMANINOFF, which is our headliner. And as the cool kids say, Rock 2. If you want to be cool, what'd you do this weekend? I just saw some Rock 2, you know, performed by the wonderful Michelle Can, which we're really in for a treat. I heard her rehearsing earlier. I snuck in a little bit, and I was blown away.
Yeah, I'm actually sad that she's not here on stage. She is preparing for the concerto, which is, as you very well may know, one of the most difficult concertos there is to play. So she needs to have her peace and quiet as she prepares for it. But she's an extraordinary pianist and a lovely, lovely person. And I think you're going to be thrilled with her playing in this concerto. It's really amazing. And just last week she was in Omaha playing Emperor Concerto, and next week she's somewhere in New York doing a recital, and the week after that she's playing another concerto, totally different somewhere else. She's got an amazing repertoire. She's an extraordinary, extraordinary virtuoso. I think you're in for a treat.
Mm-hmm. We're very lucky to have her here in Sacramento. So let's talk about Rock 2.
Okay.
I feel everyone knows it, and if they don't know the name, they have heard it before in their lives. It's 3 movements. I think each one alone is very renowned and well known. Where do we start with this piece? What has made it stand the test of time, Ari?
One of the important things I think about Rachmaninoff, and in contrast to Prokofiev, which we'll start with, Rachmaninoff was a great believer in the idea that you should not have to think about what you're hearing. That his music is meant to go directly to your heart, directly, not through your head, not through your intellect, but directly through the expression of the music itself, which in a way I think kind of encapsulates one of the great truths about music generally, which is there are so many ways to respond to it, to experience it. And I think one of the incredibly interesting things about the first half of this program is that these two pieces are absolutely in contrast with each other in that sense. But sticking with Rachmaninoff, that's a part of what's why we love it. It is, let's say, a pure expression that goes directly to your heart and soul and doesn't need to pass through the intellect, although it's also very complex, incredibly difficult. Rachmaninoff was, according to Horowitz, equally a great pianist, a great composer, and a great conductor.
Oh, a triple threat.
Yeah, triple threat. Also very elegant, dressed very well, and was very punctual. Which was something that apparently, and was very polite and charming. All of these things were things that I think Horowitz prized highly. But this piece came after a period of terrible depression for Rachmaninoff, who had he had completed his first symphony. He was quite young. This was written in 1901, and about 3 years before this, he had his first symphony premiered. He was terrified of the premiere He apparently, there was some kind of stairwell behind the stage that he hid in the stairwell during the performance of his first symphony, and apparently it went very badly, and he ran off and never saw the audience, even though the audience was clapping for him to come on. He disappeared into the night somewhere. And poor fellow, he was crushed by the fact that it was not well received. In fact, it's now been kind of rediscovered, or some manuscripts have been reworked, but it's a piece that sort of disappeared out of the repertory, and he seemed like he was going to disappear. He felt like he wanted to disappear, and he went to the countryside. His family had a house in the countryside, and a place that he loved above all other places in the world. And eventually he started to recover from his depression and upset, and in this idyllic setting that he loved so much, ended up writing this piano concerto, which has become practically everybody's favorite concerto in the world.
It really is the piano concerto. As a pianist myself, it is a dream. If you can do that, you are a rock star. And anyone who's aspiring and trying to learn that piece, it can be defeating in a way. It's extremely difficult. Michelle plays it with ease, just like butter. It's amazing. And each movement has its own little world and so much emotion, but then still so seamlessly blended together. When you are conducting a piano concerto compared to a cello concerto, or just the orchestra itself, or with a choir, how do you prepare differently, or is there a different mindset, a different approach to that?
Well, there's 2 hands, 10 fingers playing all the notes, and not just 4. On the cello, sometimes 5. That's the big difference. There are many more notes that the pianist plays. So there's a lot more to listen to accompany, to collaborate with. It's a piece that lends itself naturally to lots of rubato and bending of time. But in the midst of all this rubato and free time, there are tremendous numbers of scales and arpeggios, which you'll hear, and a big part of the accompanying collaboration has to do with that specific set of complexities. Something you'll hear, by the way, back to the environment of this house, village and home that he loved in the countryside. There was a church close by, and the bells of the church are generally considered to play an important role in the concerto itself. In a lot of Rachmaninoff's music, there's a sense of bells. But you'll hear from the very beginning, these chords at the beginning of Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto, generally considered to be reflective of the enormous bells of the Russian Orthodox Church. And you'll hear them at various times. Sometimes you hear very low, boomy bells. At other times you hear kind of more of a tinkling somewhere in the right hand. So you might listen for that high register of octaves coming, and that also seems to be reflective of bells from the church. The other thing you might recognize, you said that it kind of moves seamlessly from one movement to the other, and that's very true. The end of the first movement ends in this C minor tonality, which you'll hear and recognize, and the beginning of the second movement starts in that C minor key and moves to a quite unrelated E major in the course of 4 bars. It's a wonderful transition, but you need to, and you'll hear tonight, you hear the end of the first movement, and we try and kind of keep the sense of that atmosphere, of that tonality, and this transition of these first 4 bars in the second movement sound for all the world like a choir inside the church. To me, that feels very clear. So when you hear it tonight, you can decide if you think that's what it sounds like. But that feels very much in keeping also with the idea that he would have heard the choir from inside the church.
How amazing, Ari, to have that imagery as we are listening to that wonderful piece, the RACHMANINOFF Piano Concerto No. 2. And in contrast, the PROKOFIEV. That name may sound a little unfamiliar for some of our classical music fans as well. Can you tell us a little bit about him? And this piece is going to be so completely different, and that's why you, as the artistic director as well, had paired them together. Can you tell us a little bit about that backstory and then a little bit about the piece?
So Prokofiev, so that I mentioned that the Rachmaninoff was written in 1901. The Prokofiev was written in 1934. And it was written as a film score to a movie called Lieutenant Kijé. And Prokofiev, a Russian, had been living in Paris and wanted to be back home, basically, and was looking for opportunities to be back. And so when he had the opportunity to write the score for this film, Lieutenant Kijé, he took it up. The film is a ridiculous farce. The opposite, basically, I would almost say, when I said that Rachmaninoff prized the idea of a direct relationship between music and the heart and not having to go through the head necessarily. Prokofiev, this piece is deeply ironic, and of course irony is all lives in the head, right? It's not, we don't feel irony here in the heart. It's not in our emotions, it's in the way we intellectualize. And so the movie, which has not all that much music in it, a lot of it is silent, but it hinges on the idea that Tsar Paul in 1800 is napping and prized his naps above all things, practically, and two lovers, one of them a soldier, the other his girlfriend, wake him up from the nap when she pinches him. The lover, she pinches him in the bum. And he yelps out, and that wakes up the Tsar. And the Tsar is very angry. And basically, they need a scapegoat. The entire military establishment needs a scapegoat for who could have woken up the Tsar and earned his ire. And fortuitously, through a little mistake in penmanship, this idea of this Lieutenant Kijé, who doesn't exist, somehow gets written up on a piece of paper with a list of soldiers, but it's just a mistake in handwriting. But suddenly, it's an opportunity to blame this imaginary Lieutenant Kijé as being the one who yelled out and woke up the Tsar.
It's very clever, very cheeky.
Yeah, it's very cheeky. And then this lieutenant eventually is promoted to general, and then he has a wedding, and you'll hear there's the wedding of Kijé. Of course, there is no Kijé. The bride is there, but there's no groom, and the Orthodox priest is there, confused, doing a ceremony, which you'll hear, full of pomp and circumstance and this sumptuous wedding sound, but with an imaginary bridegroom. And at the heart of this, apparently, is the idea of this particular Russian fear of authority. So it hinges on the idea that they're so terrified of the Tsar, they're so terrified of the authority, that they have to find any possible excuse to not get in trouble themselves. The movie has lots of drinking in it, and the piece reflects. You'll hear a certain drunkenness in the writing itself.
Yeah, it's quite entertaining to just hearing the music itself. And out of curiosity, I did start Googling and trying to say, hey, what is this movie? After learning that it's attached, it's basically a film score that's about 90 years old. And you can, it's very easy to find on YouTube. You can find the full movie. It's black and white. I will say the costumes are lovely. For a modern audience, maybe a little harder to get into, but the music is lovely.
No, that's true, but you only need to watch about 8 minutes of it to understand the whole thing. You'll get it. It's largely just you see this very grumpy and expressive Tsar, angry that he's been woken up from his nap, and everybody's fear of facing him.
So was it did it end up being very popular? Did he grow from this movie and the score that he made?
Well, so regarding the piece itself, it was wildly popular, the music was. And so he was asked to write a suite using the music, which he said was by far more difficult than the writing the film score itself. And so, in fact, the suite, the thing that we're going to perform tonight, became very popular, and it's part of the repertoire. However, it's often approached and played in a way that has nothing whatsoever to do with the movie. It's lovely in its own way, and so you see the birth of Kijé and the wedding of Kijé and a troika ride and all of that, and it sounds like whatever. It's a nice suite. But in fact, I hope you'll hear this evening that this week with the orchestra, we worked on the idea of actually getting that much more ironic interpretation of the piece. So, well, you'll decide if we've accomplished that.
We look forward to that, and I'm sure we all have our own image of what our Kijé would look like.
Yeah, you're all right.
Mischief all over the place, imaginary. Yes. And so let's talk about Sibelius now. This is his third symphony. And what sets this apart from the first half of our programming today? Why did you choose to incorporate this piece? And what can you tell us about him? He's pretty popular, but as far as the man himself, who is he?
So he's popular in Finland particularly because he was a Finnish composer. He is sort of the Finnish composer. And I have a secret, not very secret,
won't be secret anymore.
Won't be secret anymore. Partial reason to program it, which is that my father is Finnish, and so I have a particular attachment to Finland and Finnish things, including Sibelius. And so I wanted the opportunity to program it. This was written in 1907. Sibelius was, in a sense, a romantic composer. He studied in Vienna, and he studied in Berlin, and he got to know Mahler and the great composers of the late 19th century and early 20th century, but he's specifically very Finnish, and that means that version of romanticism. Last time we were talking about romantic music and Brahms, Mendelssohn and all of that. So Sibelius' version of romanticism is quite different. And when I say romanticism, like the romanticism of Rachmaninoff, you think of this emotional kind of...
It's so lush and full and cinematic.
Right.
And
Sibelius is not like this. Romanticism for Finns, if my father is a good indication, has more to do with a love of and admiration for nature above all things. And Finland is filled with lakes and forests, and when you hear Sibelius's music, it's very difficult not to picture natural beauty. Sometimes in this piece you might have the feeling of hearing, I feel like this, the spreading of a bird's wings, a great bird that's about to take flight.
I get a lot of imagery of winter. To me, it just seemed, maybe because I was looking out my window, it seemed like a wintry scene.
Somebody else just said the same thing. There's actually summer in Finland too.
That's true. They're pretty used to it.
But there is something. It's still cool in the summer in Finland. There's definitely a lot of winter. Although I think, well, you can decide for yourselves. There's no right answer to this either. It feels to me that some of the second movement has a summery feel to it. But like I said, there are two main influences or two ideas that I think you'll find, I hope, in this piece. One is the glorification and love of nature. And the other, which is related to that, he became the national composer of Finland and was looked to as a nationalist, patriotic figure. Finland became a country 10 years after this piece was written. It got its independence from Russia. And there's definitely, there's something that feels for sure like a hymn, a kind of a patriotic hymn, half patriotic, half religious maybe, at the end of the piece. But again, back to nature, I think Finland's version of nationalism, or Sibelius's version of nationalism, isn't about conquering other lands or anything like that. It's about pride in the natural beauty of the country.
Yes, and I think that really comes out, especially, at least for me, I think the second movement very strongly with the woodwinds. It just was so lush and lovely, and I could hear and imagine wind blowing through leaves.
Yeah, and it's almost like I feel it's almost like a meditation on the beauty of nature. Something like that. But you should decide what you think it's about.
Well, Ari, thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us on this Saturday night, and more music to come. It's going to be so fantastic, so buckle up, get ready, and Ari needs to get ready too.
Yep, I need to get ready. Thank you so much.